Morning, everyone. So my intent was to have class. And then I went and tried to drive down the hill outside my house, and honestly, it was just too treacherous. And thank God for the internet, because we can really do it online and save ourselves a hazardous trip. And for those of you who use public transportation, an uncomfortable trip. We're gonna move into narrative, which is the next section on your dashboard. You should be finishing up your exemplification essay. We'll talk a little bit about that, and then moving on to the next week. We're about a week behind, but that's okay. We'll catch up. So let's talk a little bit first about exemplification. I put up a lecture last week, so hopefully that will help. But with exemplification, I can't stress enough specifics. So you really, sorry, want to be overly specific with your details. And a lot of times I'll send you journals back because I feel like you're not specific enough and you haven't analyzed deeply enough. So always think that you have to go one step deeper than you have. Now, with narrative, I'm going to look at my notes. So, narrative is almost always a story written about a personal experience. Now, it does not have to be your personal experience. So, usually, if we use the I, we're assuming first person, we're assuming it's the narrator's experience. They're telling it through their eyes. If we're using the third person, he, she, we, they, the narrator is actually an outsider to the story. They're actually an observer. So it does not have to be someone in the story. It does not even have to be the author. It could be a character the author creates to actually tell the story in third person. A little convoluted, but as you read, I think you should start to see when we're talking about third person versus first person and perspective. So, in a narrative, you're usually asked to reveal something, to give some insight or awareness about a way of seeing the world around you. This awareness usually comes after some kind of conflict or climax. So, some kind of conflict, problem, issue that the character has to transcend. And then some kind of, recognition that transformation has taken place or will take place. So you really have to see a narrative story that has a beginning that gives us background and context. And then we've talked about this, a rise in action. So there has to be some kind of movement upwards to that point of, conflict and climax. Once we get to the sort of top of the chart, we're going to have this point of, climax. And the climax really is that moment where our character is faced with something that they have to make a decision about. And that decision is going to determine the rest of the narrative. For a narrative, there are a couple of things that, they're not hard rules, but they're rules. So usually narratives create a shared sense of history. So the reader and the writer, or let's call them the narrator. The reader and the narrator have some kind of bond over the nature of the story. So if I'm writing a story that's totally about, the journey, let's say refusal of the call and the hero's journey, that's something that you as the reader will understand, because it's a human situation. We've all been through it, so it's recognizable. The story should have some psychological, emotional healing. So meaning the transformation allows the main character we're looking at, to change. It does not have to be for the good. In fact, probably the most interesting characters are ones who don't transform for the good. And greatest example is Breaking Bad. In Breaking Bad, we have an initial meeting with the character Walter White, who's a chemistry teacher, who's very straight-laced, even to the point where the way he dresses, and he has a wife and a son, very, very middle America. But when he finds out, I'm going to kind of ruin it, but when he finds out he has lung cancer and thinks he only has 6 months to live, that's the catalyst for the rest of the story. That's going to cause him to act. And he's going to act badly. That decision is going to define pretty much the rest of his life, and definitely the rest of the series. So there we see someone who's actually transforming for the worse. Of course, that's perspective. You may think that his transformation is fine, and another person may think it's horrendous. There always should be some insight into the character, so you always want to be able to show not just physical traits, but you really want to show the internal. Most of us have two fights going on. We have the external, so the world around us, and then we have the internal, which is really the fight within, and those two things consistently are at odds. The narrative is always sequential, meaning you don't usually go out of order. We do see film narratives that are flashbacks, but written narratives tend to be very ordered. So really think about, what's the order your story should go. They're detailed in respect of senses. So they use the senses of sight, smell, sound, touch, and taste. Normally, sight's the first sense we use, but think about if someone's blind or, visually challenged, what sense do they use? Maybe they use sound more, maybe they use smell more. So be very conscious of what your character's limitations are. It's going to focus really strongly on a connection between past or present events, people, places. So you really kind of think of it as starting in the past maybe and moving towards the present. We're seeing obviously sci-fi stories or dystopian stories that move from the present to the future. That's not what I'm asking you to do. I'm really asking you to look at, what came before defines what you do now. So you're going to write a narrative. First, you're going to read the work by Norman Mailer. It's kind of an interesting work. And then I read the prompt, and you're going to write a narrative. And this is what I'm going to suggest you do. First, decide what you're writing about and commit to that, okay? Then find what you think is most important or relevant with regards to that event, incident, situation. Finally, what you're going to do is you're going to pull up very specific sensory details so that the reader feels it, that they're part of it. Use visual words. Be very, very present in your writing. So when you do past tense, a lot of times you tend to lose that emotional relationship with the author. Okay. Um, so finish up week 3, move on to week 4. Week 4 should be finished. Everything through week 4 should be finished next week. I know this has been hard because I've been sick and the weather and everything, but it's okay. We're fine. I'm going to just trust that you guys are keeping up online. If you have a problem, just email me or text me. Hopefully, everything will be fine. We'll be in school tomorrow, so if you need to come by my office, you can. And I will see you guys soon.